I drive down to Sotheby's or Christie's. Otherwise, I very seldom leave my room. I am not too strong, and my researches are very absorbing. Hi there! Just talking to Eugene here. He likes a good story. Everyone likes a good story, and this is why reading is such a great tool. Today we're going to look at wide reading, and we're going to look at narrow reading, and the impact that they can have on vocabulary and learning language as a whole. So guys, check out the video, and at the end we'll come back for a little summary for you. Now Eugene, where were we? And here, no, we've read that bit? Okay. Well, I've got to find my place. Go and watch the video, and at the end we'll come back. Well guys, today it's all about reading, and for your listening pleasure, I have invited my good friend Justin in to discuss the art of reading for language learning and language acquisition. So before I introduce Justin, I'll just tell you a little bit about him. He's a teacher, and he is fluent, well, all but fluent in Korean, and he also has I think it's an intermediate level of Mandarin. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's nice to meet you guys. My name is Justin.
Excellent, Justin. So thanks for joining me. I'm going to start with a real simple question. How long have you studied Korean?
Studied Korean for a little over 4 years now.
Okay, so in that 4 years, how long was it before you started to feel like you could fit in and converse, let's say comfortably, so you weren't sort of a little bit shaky, you felt confident?
I'd say after about 2.5 years, because at that point, I started dreaming in Korean and thinking in Korean while I was walking in the street.
Okay, so you're saying 2.5 years, so this comes back to the whole idea of time. You do need to put in the time. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's true. Everyone learns at a different pace, and you really do get out of it what you put into it.
Okay, so 2.5 years before you started to feel confident. I've been studying Korean because I'm so busy doing these videos and working on other projects and studying. My level is nowhere near as good as yours for the same time period. I'm studying like 5 minutes a day, although I am a lot better than other people who have been here longer. You've been here, well, you studied for 2.5 years. Today we're looking specifically at reading. How much reading would you have done in that time? And give me some tips about reading. So basically today I'm just going to let you go with the mic and just interject occasionally. Tell us a little bit about reading. What are your tips?
Well, while I think speaking, listening, and writing are very important, in my case, reading has held the most importance because I'm somewhat of a visual learner, so I feel that by reading novels or articles or other forms of writing, I can pick up a foreign language much faster. And so I would spend at least 2 hours a day reading, sometimes as many as 6 hours a day reading.
Wow. And was that right from the onset, or did you sort of gradually build into reading, or did you start like day one, bam, I'm going to start reading?
Well, I started with conversation books because to this day I haven't been to any Korean language academies. I basically only do self-study. And from there on, once my level increased a little bit, I graduated to comic books. So I feel for beginners, starting with comic books or other reading material that has pictures is very helpful because you can pick up on the context clues, even if you don't know all of the vocabulary.
Oh, I totally agree. Again, going back to the frequency, intensity, time, and type, you're looking at the intensity or the level. You're saying, use something at the level comic book. It's written more. Generally, you get younger adult comic books, children's comic books, adult comic books, so you can change the stimulus.
Yeah, but I wouldn't recommend getting a children's comic book or especially a fairy tale because most adults are not interested in those stories, and I felt that when I read those types of books, I got disinterested very quickly, and I was learning vocabulary and other phrases that were not practical whatsoever.
Okay, so again, sticking on that point of make it interesting.
Yeah, that's the key point, actually.
Okay, so do you remember your first sort of series, or what was your first book? Do you remember?
First comic book series I read was One Piece.
Ah, is it Japanese?
It is Japanese, yeah, but I got the Korean version, of course.
Okay, and how many of those did you read?
I read up to about volume 75, I think.
Wow. Okay, so when you were reading as a beginner, intermediate, and advanced, how did your strategies change?
Changed quite a bit. I'd say in the beginning, I was reading more for pleasure, especially with the comic books, so I would not write down very much of what I was learning, and I wouldn't look up a lot of words. I was just trying to get used to reading Korean for extended periods of time. And from there, I moved up to reading novels, and the first novel series I read was The Game of Thrones.
In Korean?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I watched the first season on TV, and I was hooked, so I wanted to read the remaining books to find out what happens in the future seasons. But I felt very guilty about reading the English versions because, to be honest, I'm an English teacher by trade right now, and if I'm not in class, I hate using English. I want to focus on the foreign languages that I'm learning and completely immerse myself in the language. So I decided to get the Game of Thrones books in Korean.
Okay, so it was something you were interested in. It covered the idea of just reading for enjoyment.
Right.
But there must have been some time where you were actively trying to figure out, because I'm just reading, similar to you, dialogue books at the moment because I'm a relative beginner.
Right.
And there are some, I'll look up keywords and I'll use the words around the word I know to help me try and figure it out. And a lot of the time I'm guessing, and I'm finding I'm guessing correctly. What about you? I mean, percentage-wise, when you're a beginner, intermediate, and advanced, when you're a beginner, you understand almost nothing.
Right.
So how did you start to figure out, oh, I'm getting this?
Well, when I made the jump from comic books to novels, then I changed my reading habits somewhat. So before I said that I started to read the Game of Thrones books, so the first copy of that, I decided to really actively study it. So I would circle any and all words that I was unfamiliar with, and then after finishing the chapter, go and look them up. So I felt by doing that for the first couple chapters, I could really get a better feel for what the book was talking about and become more comfortable with the story. And from there on, I would circle less and less words, even if I didn't understand some of them, because I would like to pick up the sentence structure and read at a more natural pace.
Okay, so you're sort of combining active study with passive study and trying to get a feel for the writing style and a feel for what was going on.
Right.
Okay. And how would you recommend that teachers encourage reading? Because the research is showing more and more that students who read in the target language often, well, in the majority of cases, do a lot better in learning the language and passing high-stakes exams. And as always, check out the references at the end. But trying to explain to a student, just read for enjoyment, what are your tips? How can teachers encourage our students?
Well, first of all, I think the teacher really needs to set a good example for their students by showing that they themselves are avid readers. And from there, it's all about engaging with the student. So maybe something like reading the same book as the student can be very helpful, because that would really make it easy to converse with the student about what they've learned and check their understanding, as well as build on their thoughts related to the reading.
Okay, and for those who don't teach adults, what about for younger children? How could the teacher encourage a student, or maybe even get parents involved? What are your thoughts?
Well, I actually have some teaching experience with young Korean children, and I found that after reading some fairy tales, allowing them to summarize information by drawing a picture of what they imagined while reading the story, as well as writing a couple sentences below the actual picture, really helped to engage them in their studies.
I think that's an amazing idea. Kids love to be active, and I also think with the parents, I think teachers need to encourage parents to read with their children. I think if a little little kid goes home and mum or dad is reading with them, as you said before about the teacher setting a good example, I think we should encourage the parents to set a good example. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's very important for parents to read to their children, as well as for teachers to read to their students, because honestly, up until this point, when I've been teaching adults, I usually allow the student to read. But based on recent research that I've read, I found that it might be a little more effective in certain situations for the teacher to actually read to the students, so they can kind of pick up the flow of the writing itself.
Look, I think that's great advice, and I also think it covers things like listening and reading. So you're getting sort of 2 for the price of 1 when you're doing it with the teacher, or maybe with the parents at home. Encourage your parents to do it with their students, the young students at home. Now, let's look at the numbers, remembering that frequency is the key to learning new words and new structures. I think it's important that we understand the numbers. So, first, students who read, say, 5 minutes a week, they will only read 21,000 words in a year. If a student reads 10 minutes a day, they will read around 600,000 words in a year. If you read 15 minutes a day, that'll go up to about 1.1 million words. And if you read, say, an hour a day, you'll be reading about 4.5 million words a year. This is going to give you a huge advantage, not only with learning new words, but you're going to be doing a lot of this passive study, because remember, the brain works in many ways, but we've got the sort of declarative memory, which stores facts. But what we're going to be focusing on here when we're reading is procedural memory. And this is the sort of memory which helps us perform tasks without conscious awareness. So we're picking up little things like semantics or the subtle rules involved with a language. So, I know I talk a lot about being actively involved, but being passive and just reading for enjoyment offers so many benefits. Justin, before we leave, do you have any final tips for our students, or more importantly, for our teachers to help our students? Any final tips at all?
Yeah, I would say that always to have 2 books with you. One that is quite difficult and about a subject that you would like to learn about, most likely a nonfiction book. And then also keep a fiction book with you. That's more of light reading. So then whenever you're on the subway or you have some free time at work, you can just pick that up and read for about 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, I think that's great advice. I advise my students of something almost the same. I say there should be 3. I'm a little bit meaner than you, I guess. I think there should be something for pleasure. So maybe it's a magazine, or maybe it's a cookbook or something, or a novel, which you mentioned. I think it should be, and I'm talking for adults, I think it should be something educational, maybe for their work, like business or something like that. And then I also think there should be something almost pop culture-ish, like a glossy magazine, so they can pick up the slang and, look at the pictures and enjoy their time. So we sort of agree on this whole idea of working concurrently on 2 or 3 different books. So I personally like to thank you for coming in, and I'm sure our listeners really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
It was my pleasure.
Excellent, guys. So remember, teachers, encourage this reading. The students are going to pick up a lot of new words and phrases just by being exposed to the language. And get involved. Don't just tell your students, you must read, but then you're not reading yourself. And also set some reading strategies, just like we do with the listening strategies. Are the students reading for the gist? Are they reading to learn some new words? Are they reading just for enjoyment? As a teacher, it's up to you to guide the student in a way which you think will be most effective in helping them. So that concludes our discussion today. I hope to see you in the next video. But, as I've had occasion to remark, there is but one step from the grotesque to the horrible. No! How good was that? That Sherlock Holmes and Watson. They're a great team. They're a great duo. Guys, Eugene and I just finished another great book. Remember, reading. So important. Wide reading, narrow reading. Slightly different, both highly effective. As I said, get a book, a novel, something the student's going to enjoy. I also use magazine Esquire. I think it's great, a lot of idioms, a lot of slang. And as we saw in the video, a lot of the students find this one quite difficult. The content is quite enjoyable and it also enriches their vocabulary. Finally, something a little bit more business or world news orientated. I use Harvard Business Review. I think as a trio, they work great together, but you can choose any magazines, any books you like. Most importantly, engage the student when you choose your material. Eugene, I'm sorry, I've got to go. I'm going to go get another book. Next time we'll come back, we'll read something else. You can choose this time. Guys, I'm out of here. Remember, keep English real.